name is Shirley Brill, and with me today, I'm happy to have Jan Flanders. Jan Flanders, I met recently, and I was fascinated by her story because I found out that she is a three-time tissue recipient. Let's meet Jan Flanders.
Hi, Shirley. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and to be talking with you. My experience with donation and transplantation started longer ago than I thought it did, which was 5 years ago when my husband died and became a cornea and tissue donor, for which I'm very, very proud. Shirley mentioned that I am also a tissue recipient, and that is very true. I just didn't realize the amazing gifts that I had been given in surgeries that I had had before that. I received donor tendon when I had both of my thumb joints replaced, and I received donor bone tissue when I had the joint of this finger fused, so it won't bend anymore. What I've learned about donation, organ, eye, and tissue donation, has just been magnified since Paul died. And I'm very, very grateful to the people at my organ procurement organization, which we will call an OPO from now on because it's really long, which is New England Donor Services. So 4 days after Christmas in 2017, I was running some errands, and Paul was going to be going to work at about 12:30. He worked late on Fridays. We were looking forward to having the whole weekend off for the first time in a long time. At that time, I was a Hallmark manager, and I did retail hours. I tried calling him and texting him during my errands to see if he wanted me to bring him anything for lunch, and he didn't respond, which was unlike him. So I got home at 12:40 and saw his car was still in the driveway. He would have left 10 minutes earlier to get to work by 1. I went in the house and heard the shower running, called his name, ran up the stairs, and found him in the shower, unconscious. The water was ice cold. Of course, I jumped right in, turned off the water, and started to do CPR, which is not easy to do on a sitting up, wet body. I called 911, and it seemed like they were there in moments. The operator told me to stop breathing into his mouth, but just keep doing chest compressions. So they arrived, made me go downstairs, let me go back up while they tried to work on him. And before I knew it, they were whisking him out into the cold winter air, into the ambulance. And I was left standing there with the next door neighbor who had come in when she saw the ambulance. She drove me to the hospital, and I hadn't even been there 10 minutes. I had just met the social worker when the doctor came and told me that he had already been gone by the time he got there. I suspected that anyway. I just didn't want to believe it. So when I got home, hours later, I remembered that I hadn't hung up our landline from the 911 call. So I ran up to the bathroom and punched it off. I had friends who had brought me home, and they were there. And while the phone was still in my hand, it started ringing. It was someone from New England Donor Services who had been trying to call all afternoon since they had been informed of Paul's death by the hospital. I hadn't thought about donation at this point. I knew Paul was a donor. I'm a donor. As Paul used to say, what kind of a psycho wouldn't check the box? But I, like many other people, thought of organ donation as the vital organs only. And maybe corneas, but really the idea of tissue donation had not entered my head. So I was delighted when this lovely young woman told me that, oh no, it's not too late. We can recover skin tissue, bone tissue, nerve tissue. We can recover his heart valves. That surprised me, since his heart is what killed him. So I said, absolutely, you do. You recover everything that you possibly can.
Tell me, Jan, how has Paul's donation made a difference in the lives of others?
And they did. Over the next weeks, my aftercare specialist, Kristen Ross, who has become a dear friend, would update me on the transplants that had happened thanks to Paul's donations. Unfortunately, his heart valves were not able to be donated because there was bacteria in one of the samples that they took. And if there's bacteria in any of the samples of a certain type, they have to scrap the whole thing. So his heart valves were not going to be able to be donated. Since then, Paul has restored sight to 2 women, one in Connecticut, one in Maryland. And his over 125 skin, tendon, nerve, and bone donations have helped dozens and dozens of people by improving their lives. All of his skin tissue, I believe there were seven samples, went to women undergoing post-mastectomy breast reconstruction. Some of his nerve tissue went to some of those same women, not the same women, but women who had had the same kind of surgery, who were then having resensitization surgery. His bone tissue helped people by being employed in spinal fusions, ACL reconstruction, broken bones, all kinds of things. And his tendons were also used. I recently learned that one of the tendon recipients was not able to write and now can, thanks to Paul. Tendons are also what allowed me to write, and the bone in this finger. I'm a professional calligrapher, and I was very young to have joint transplants, but that's what I needed. And then the erosive osteoarthritis that I have in my hands, in my fingers, made this joint so painful that I couldn't hold a pen without having it hurt a lot.
Why is terminology so important to you?
The reason that I didn't acknowledge or understand these 3 gifts that I had been given while Paul was alive was because my surgeon, a wonderful, wonderful surgeon whom I would not have traded for anything in the world, used the wrong terminology when talking about these transplants. He said I was getting cadaver tendon and cadaver bone. That's not the way to talk to a recipient who is being given this amazing gift. It conjures up a completely different image in your mind of what's going on, what the operation involved. And you don't think of an actual person making that choice, making that selfless choice to help others after his or her death. So I didn't even think about it. It was Kristen who told me about 8 months after Paul died that, Jan, you're a recipient too. And I'm so grateful to my donors and to their families for the fact that I can do what I love to do again.
Tell us about Paul being honored at the Rose Parade in 2022.
The way Paul came to be honored with a fluorograph at the Rose Parade was because Oxygen, Nerve Tissue Bank in Florida, had decided to sponsor a fluorograph on the float for the first time. Anna Lane sent an email to different OPOs, I suppose, and when it got to New England Donor Services, because Paul and I lived in Massachusetts, my aftercare specialist happened to be in the office that day, and 3.5 years after his death, Kristen said, it's got to be Paul. It's got to be Paul. I learned in August of 2021 from Kristen that Paul had been chosen to be a Florograph honoree on the Donate Life float in the Rose Parade. So he represented nerve tissue donors, and Axogen was generous enough to send me to Pasadena and let me go through the most amazing experience of my life. I'm very, very grateful. I didn't know that Donate Life had a float since 2004. They've had a float in the parade, which honors donors in the form of fluorographs. That Paul's right behind me there. And those are placed on the float. They're worked into the beautiful floats that they make. Riding on the floats are recipients of all sorts of things. And walking with the float are living donors. I spent almost a week in Pasadena, learning so much about donation and transplantation, meeting their donor families, meeting recipients and their families, meeting living donors who do the most selfless thing that I can think of and give parts of themselves to total strangers in many cases. The experience I had in Pasadena was so life-altering that I decided then and there that I was going to be a part of it for as long as I could. Volunteers make the photographs. Paul's was created by now a very good friend of mine and a 3-time kidney recipient, Jolene Vargas, who is a One Legacy ambassador and has been for many years. There's no shortage of people who want to create these, who want to volunteer and make these fluorographs, and also honorees' families are also able to, if they want to come out and do their own fluorographs. Anyway, I sent several emails to One Legacy afterward and was delighted when I got word that, sure, I could come and volunteer. I went in October and it was a weekend. I assumed I was going to be able to do one because I'd never made one. They're floral photographs is what they are. They take a photograph and create it using all natural, all organic materials. So I didn't know what I was doing, but they have wonderful people there who tell you what to do. And I finished one in one day and I did one the next day. At the end of December, I was able to watch the parade and see my artwork going down Colorado Boulevard. Paul would actually have been more proud of that than seeing his own face go by, because he was my biggest champion. It was really amazing. I'm going to keep going back and doing the fluorographs, and I'm going to get there for other parades. And I recommend it to anybody. Helping decorate the float. It's the most awesome thing in the world. It's wonderful.
So now, Jan, tell us, what does it mean to be an ambassador for so many transplant organizations?
I've become passionate about organ, eye, and tissue donation, as you can probably tell. And I am very, very proud to have become an ambassador for UNOS, for Donate Life Virginia, and for LifeNet Health, which is also Virginia, where I moved last year. I'm hoping to get a job in the field of donation, and I keep trying. I want to spread my story. I want to spread our story. I want to educate people. I want to debunk all of the myths that too many people buy into about donation. Nobody's going to let you die if you're in the hospital and there's somebody else who needs a heart. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to just take a liver and put it into somebody else without doing extensive testing and matching and making sure everything is right. Shirley knows all about this. Shirley lived for 3 years before getting her lungs. They needed to be just right. And that's why 15 years later, here she is with that same set of donated lungs. I want to educate the medical community about the proper terminology and how important it is when speaking to donor families and recipients. Don't say cadaver. This is a donor. This is a person who has given you, is going to be giving you this tremendous gift. Don't say that they're going to harvest their organs. They recover organs. Don't let what happened to me with my surgeon, I don't want to happen to anybody else. I missed out on the opportunity to thank my donor families because I didn't know. So that's what I'm trying to do. I connected with you and EMAT and going to be able to help the cause in any way that I can. I could not be prouder of Paul. He was only 48 and he had a long, long life ahead of him. He had many more concerts to go to. He had a lot more piano to play. He had a lot more baseball to watch. But he is living on in so many people. And that is just the most wonderful thing. But yeah, you know, when I talk about Paul, I'm always gonna feel sad. But a lot of the tears are happy tears when I think about all the people, you know, who can play baseball, who can walk without crutches or, you know, canes, and, you know, who can stand up straight, who can play instruments again. It's really incredible.
What about Lester?
My sweet Lester, our sweet Lester, our tuxedo cat, who Paul and I rescued. Well, he rescued us when he was he was about 3, and he and Paul were so close. He really, having to get up in the morning to feed Lester, what got me out of bed a lot of days. Lester and I moved to Cape Cod pretty much at the end of the world a year after Paul died, and Lester developed diabetes and we had to deal with that, but he was always there for me. I could always feel Paul's presence so strongly in Lester. And then in the summer of 2021, I went through the process of watching both of my parents die. Lester was there. He helped me through. But 3 days before Christmas, 1 week before the 4th anniversary of Paul's death, Lester made it very clear to me that he needed to go. And I had to let him go. I really hate Christmas now. So I had to say goodbye, but I know that he's not in pain anymore. And that somewhere over the Rainbow Bridge, he and Paul are playing. And that makes me happy. He was a great cat.
Jan, we thank you so much for sharing that amazing story. Paul is smiling down because you are sharing, and I didn't mention anything, that he was a classical pianist. He was a big Astro fan. Was that?
Astros and Red Sox. He's wearing a Red Sox hat in his fluorograph, but he also loved the Astros because Nolan Ryan was his hero.
We so appreciate you sharing both of your stories. Again, the story of her husband, Paul Flanders, and also her story as a tissue recipient. Educating minorities about transplants. Once again, thanks you.
Thank you, Shirley. It's been an honor.